Welcome back to Web Certain TV. I'm Gemma Houghton. Today I'm here with Jannis Rudzki-Weise, who is part of the digital communications team at Audi, and we're going to be discussing the Mexican market in particular, as well as content marketing and how the brand handles that. Hi Jannis, thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So you've been looking after communications specifically for the Mexican market for Audi. Can you just tell us a little bit about what the digital landscape is like there right now?
Yeah, so the Mexican market is a little bit different than what we know here from Europe. You have a population that is not as well connected as here. What that means is you have, when we started our project about 2 years ago, we found a situation that was looking pretty much the following. You have about half, not even half the population is online, but of those people who are online, more than 90% are really on social media and are expecting brands to communicate with them there. They're really eager to find out more, to get into a dialogue with the brands, to follow them, to be part of a community. And that's something that we found was completely different from what we have here. And we saw that this was really like the perfect situation because we thought that as the country develops economically, the 50% or less than 50% will eventually go up to a European level, so everybody will be online. Yeah. And then we still have a group of people that is so fond of social media. And the other thing that's super interesting about the Mexican landscape is that there are many people who now go online, but they never had a desktop computer. Yeah. So they go straight from nothing to mobile. So extremely interesting. You have a country that has more than 120 million people and a big affinity to mobile use. Mm-hmm. So a very, very interesting situation to us, for us to do marketing and communications.
And I think that's true of many of the emerging markets, really, that you can't treat them in the same way that you would a European market because they're coming to it much later and they're almost skipping out stages that we in Europe will have gone through, like using desktop or certain other kind of media, and they're really almost getting ahead because that's the first thing they're experiencing. It means that you have to tailor the approach and approach things in quite a different way.
Right, that's on the technical side, that's something that's interesting. Culturally, you also find other differences. Mexican people don't like to read that much, especially that was something interesting for us as a very technical brand. We're engineer driven. We talk about facts. We try to explain certain things to you. All this, we had to put aside for a second and go and create stories, emotional stories. People like visual content. This can be video, this can be graphics, and so on. And they like a very personal approach of communications. So, for example, what we did when we started doing social media there for our new plant that we were building there at this time, we noticed that our community management was a good way of interacting with those people, yet it was not really personal enough because you still only had the small icon with your logo, and it really wasn't enough to really build this personal relationship. Yeah. So we then decided that, for example, one of our colleagues, in this case our spokesperson, was the one to actually record videos and answer questions users had. This was the thing then that was so successful because people really felt like, oh, there's really this guy, there's a face to the brand, and he really cares about my question and actually explains something to me. And this was the breakthrough moment for us in communications when we really noticed that, yes, there are ways how we can communicate on this level, on this very personal level. And starting from there, it was great fun. We were building this community, and people were just so enthusiastic about what we were doing, which of course made it easy and very fun to do social media and communications.
So of course, when you say they want to engage with brands, it is really the people behind the brands. It's not a corporate image that is just put out there to represent, the brand values, perhaps, without a real person. That is a challenge for a global brand, I guess, especially, like you say, a brand like Audi that's very traditional, it's very based on its core values of its quality and its engineering and has a certain way of communicating. How is that managed globally to allow for these differences in market and make sure that the actual communication is suitable for the local audience?
So, of course, we want to make sure as a global brand that when we communicate, everybody feels that this is being communicated by Audi. So it doesn't matter if you're in India, if you're in Europe or in the US, or wherever you are, you need to see right away, you need to hear right away, and you need to read right away that this is something that's being communicated by Audi.
Yeah.
So of course we have certain let's say, rules that we follow when we communicate. But this also means that, of course, this can be tropicalized in a way locally. So we'll have, certain campaigns that we run that are maybe even global campaigns, but yet still we need the expertise and the recommendations from our colleagues in the countries that are on site, that know their audience much better than we do here, operating from a headquarter perspective. They are part of their community. They know who the people are, they know what they're interested in, and they also know how, from a cultural perspective, how content needs to be designed in order to work, in order to be accepted, so that it is interesting to people. So it's more or less a give and take. We work very closely with the markets, and it is not only a centralized unit that is making all the calls and saying, please communicate this now. Really the opposite is we work very closely with the markets to find something that is effective and attractive at the end.
And of course, you're talking about, storytelling, and that's something that comes up time and time again now, and it's all brands are starting to move to really think about that. What is our story? How do we get that across? When it comes to kind of the Mexican market, what were the ideas, what were the key elements that really kind of captured their attention and really got them excited about the brand?
I think it always works the same way. When you tell a story, it needs to be something that people can relate to.
Yeah.
People will always ask themselves, what's in it for me? Is this something that I know, that I've heard of before? So we were using a lot of stories where people were relating, in a way, to what we were saying. So for example, we were doing a campaign back then, so we coined like a term which was pasión y perfección. So it's passion and perfection. This was one of the things we wanted to highlight. But then we said, now we want to explain what that means. But explaining this in this case doesn't mean we put the CEO in front of a camera and have him explain, what these two values mean
Very
for us.
Very clearly, yeah. Passion it doesn't really
exactly.
work.
It's not just about broadcasting, explaining, but we actually have to show people. People need to understand themselves what this means, and then say, wow, I have the same thing. It's something that drives me. So for example, this was an idea that was born one weekend when we were in Mexico City, and we saw some of the street artists performing at a great level, but also, with so much concentration and training that was going into their performance. And we thought, this really is passion and perfection. So our first small little campaign was really to show those guys how they were preparing for the presentation with, all the passion that they have. And then we used this and kept our brand really in the background.
Yeah.
And then people were super interested because they say, oh, I know this guy. He, I always go to this place where I have my coffee, and he always performs there with his, his partner or his friends. So we were able to create, in a way, a relation between the values that stand for us, and at the same time show people and at the same time show people that this is something that they're also connected to. So for us, the strongest thing was not to show them and explain to them what we mean by that, but actually have them understand and have them explain those values from their perspective. And then they eventually get to the point where they say, oh, it matches. It's exactly what I stand for.
And that's actually a really interesting way of using influencers, because the concept of influencers is very popular now, but it's very much about online influencers who's got a lot of followers on Twitter or YouTube. But actually, this is kind of almost using, this is an offline influencer, somebody that does street art in the middle of the city, but actually that also connects in, and it's about using things that people will be interested in, be able to follow.
And talking about influencers, it's interesting that you bring this up, because influencers, when we hear the word, we often see and think about these influencers that have 10, 20 million followers, and who obviously are being viewed by, and their videos are being watched by a lot of people. In Mexico, we also worked a lot with micro-influencers, meaning people who don't have 1 million followers, but who stand for something, and that doesn't have to be related directly to the automotive industry, but somebody who, when it comes to design or art or fashion or something, is very specialized on one area, and does it have an influence on people in his community in this area? So this was also interesting for us. As part of this community, we of course saw many people as influencers.
Yeah.
Everybody is an influencer. You know, if I talk to my friends about something and they go home and tell, you know, their friends about my brand, this is also a small influencer. So we didn't only concentrate on big influencers with millions and millions of followers, but at the same time wanted to reach out to micro-influencers to also not only tell our story, but also to listen and to understand what their community is looking for, so that we could
learn and improve as a result.
Exactly.
And then social, you know, again, talking about social, it's very popular there. That is kind of a really big channel. I think I've seen a statistic that the Mexicans are probably the most active every day on social media in the world. I think it's something like 7 hours a day or something, compared to 3 hours anywhere else, or something like that. So that's clearly a channel that you need to be tapping into. Which particular platforms are big there? Which are there any that are, you know, the most interesting for marketers, especially maybe just launching in the market, to focus on?
Yeah, so the situation there is not so different from what we have here. So it's not like Asian channels that you have all of a sudden. There are no channels that are so big that are only from Mexico. But what you do find, I just said, you know, they're very, very visually oriented.
Yeah.
So they love stories that are video stories. They love photos. So of course, you have something like Instagram that's huge. People like YouTube, and of course Facebook. But depending on who you talk to, you probably find a similar situation here. Everything that's live event is Twitter. Live streams are a big thing. So people really consume everything. We just need to understand what is their context. So basically saying, when they're on Snapchat, when they're on Instagram, what are they looking for? And does that, you know, match with what we want to say, or would we be interrupting the party, if you will, if we just, you know, communicated there all of a sudden? Yeah,
and especially given that their propensity to communicate with brands, you want to make sure that if you are going in with something worth communicating to add to that community. If you go in with just an advertising broadcast message, I guess you're going to really alienate them and do damage to your brand potentially.
I think it always depends on, do you have something to offer that adds value? Is it something that, you know, makes them smarter? Is it something that helps them, that has a great offer for them? And then if you find the right context, then you're definitely on the right track. For example, for me, you know, you get a new device, new phone or something, you're trying to find out how to change one of the settings. What do? You maybe put it into Google, and then this actually takes you to some website where you can find the answer. For me, it doesn't matter if this is, you know, being delivered to me by the brand itself, you know, by an influencer, or just by an average guy who posts, you know, the answer on a forum. So for me, it's all about the content and if that adds any value to me. And this was what we were trying to do there as well, is think about the content first and then make sure we find the right context to deliver a message like this. But really, we found out by listening to the people. You know, if you make a post and you see all the comments, you know, do you really read all the comments? Do you really answer all questions, all comments to actually create a conversation? Many brands don't. They make their posts, then they do the community management, answering the question, but they are not using this information.
Where else can you answer that question? Who else might need that response? And
exactly. To think about, what is a typical journey somebody has who's in touch with a brand? What kind of question does that person have? What is his situation in life, maybe? And what kind of content can you deliver that would help that person? So that was something that was very valuable and also was really appreciated by the people.
Absolutely. And then your experience, you've also lived in Mexico, so you've got probably a really good understanding of the culture, the way that they behave online, offline in general. Are there any tips or insights you could share that would be interesting, just to understand a little bit more about how culture works there and what that means for marketers?
Mexico is definitely a fantastic country, culturally super interesting, a great cuisine. So I really enjoy living there. One of the things that is very important for Mexicans is really this personal relationship with somebody. Much more personal than here in Europe. If family is over everything, and family, for example, would also mean, you know, sometimes your colleagues at work. So you get into the inner circle very quickly. And but you also got to give back. So
Yeah.
it's not just a one-way street, which was the same for us in marketing. So we wanted to see that our community was kind of part of the Audi family.
Yeah.
And the big project with building one of the biggest plants in the Audi group was really, for us, it was really key to involve those people and to make them feel like they are part of this project, even though they may not directly work, for Audi. So this personal level of communication was something that I enjoyed both on a professional level, doing communications in Mexico, but also in my private life.
And then how do you see the future developing in Mexico? It's one of the kind of big emerging markets, really. It's a growing economy. We're seeing more people becoming, active on the internet. What do you think are the kind of big things to look out for there in the coming years?
I think Mexico has a great future ahead when it comes to digital and communications and marketing. I think the trends that we're discussing here in Europe will also become very relevant. That is VR, AR, especially if you live maybe in a more secluded area, not in the Mexico City area, not in the Puebla area, or the bigger cities in Mexico. Let's say, so I'm a big sports fan, right? So, for example, if you live far away from your favorite team and from the stadium, you cannot really go to any of the games.
Yeah.
But if you have the opportunity to participate and to become part of this great experience via virtual reality, something like this, I think that's a great opportunity also for brands to really have a first row seat and really feel like you're part of this entire experience, although you may be thousands of miles away. I think those things will become very, very important in the future.
Yeah.
Other than, of course, the digital communications channels that we already have that will develop. As I said, I think Mexico will also develop. Of course, economically, this will mean more people will have access to the internet. They will be on social media.
Yeah.
So it's really up to us, marketing and communications experts, to offer them really this experience that they're looking for.
Great. Well, it sounds like an exciting market to be part of.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much for sharing those insights today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.